Okay, it says we're live. I'm gonna open my phone and
See if you can see it on YouTube live on your
yeah,
phone.
yeah. It's probably delayed by a few seconds, so it might seem a little weird looking at it. Uh, let's see. I know this is not the right app. I don't think. Well, maybe it is. Hold on. Let's see. No, that's not what I want. Oh, yeah, there it is, and it is.
Very good. How much is a delay?
Oh,
Seconds?
several
Sometimes
seconds. Um,
sometimes the delay is quite considerable. Sometimes
yeah,
it's
it's
much.
considerable. Now Friday night, big gaming night. A lot of people are streaming their games.
Right.
Yeah, I'd say it's about 15 seconds right now.
Yeah, that'd
Now,
be enough to really confuse you if you're listening to one and talking on the other.
I wouldn't do that. Okay.
This- Well, when people leave their microphones open on Zoom and then you can
Yeah.
hear all kinds of stuff going on, that's extremely
Yeah. That's why I'm using my
annoying.
phone. I didn't want to crosstalk. But yeah, it's I would it's about 15 seconds or so. Now, it may not be that every time, but I'm gonna. It confirmed that it is live. Yes. Okay. This is actually tons easier than the old OBS, where you had to um, do a bunch of rigmarole at YouTube and then come back to OBS and
You know,
paste
they've
stuff
had
in.
time to they've had
This,
time to streamline stuff.
yeah. So this is and let's see, live chat. Okay. Now I haven't tried this before. Uh,
You're gonna let super chats be on and take big donations from people.
I haven't even looked into that. I don't. I think a donation to me would be misplaced. There's so many good charities to send money to that are desperately in need of it, and I'm self-funding and it doesn't
Uh,
cost me much money at all
You
to
can
do this.
always say you're doing it for charity.
Well, I do go to some streams sometimes and stick a couple bucks in the super chat or something to show my appreciation. Sometimes that doesn't happen very
Being
often, but
being the kind of person I am, I have never contributed a dollar to a super chat.
well, but it's when I think of all the things there are out there to donate to. My kid sister, she's not a kid anymore, but her youngest just graduated from high school. But my kid sister is a member of Doctors Without Borders, and
Oh,
she has done some work with them, and so that's definitely a great charity. I think they're unimpeachable. So
I've watched streams where people have contributed multi-hundred-dollar donations. So yeah, and some people will go on with live streams for 8 hours and the terminology that's emerged for that is farming super chats because the longer they stay on, the more super chat if they're popular, the more super chats they get, and so they earn their money that way, and some people earn a lot of money that way, though not as much as the successful OnlyFans girls.
yeah, well, some of those like Twitch gamers, they actually are raising money for charity.
Yes, some of
Uh,
them are. More of them are
um,
making themselves wealthy, but
I know my son
it's
my
a
son watches some of those. He's kind of outgrowing that now, but
it's a classic Pareto distribution though, where 20% get 80% of the money and 80% get
I think
20% of
it's
the
more
money.
like 2% get 80% of the money.
You might be right.
And yeah, well, it's like it's like acting or rock and roll. You know, there's a very small chance you could become wildly successful at it,
And most people are not.
and
Yes,
the vast
absolutely.
majority will never
Yeah.
get above the poverty level in that profession. And it's
Yeah.
not that they aren't talented. It's not that they don't work hard. It's just that there's only so many slots. You know.
And there's only so many things that will interest people. So I
Yeah.
have now, I think about 85 videos up on YouTube, and most of them have only double-digit views on them. I've got a couple that have more, but if you're talking about a marginal subject matter and you're not really good at speaking and you're not really incredibly good looking, you're not going to, doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to,
Yeah.
there are things you can do. You can talk about the subjects that make people interested are pets, travel, food, and that sort of thing, makeup tutorials,
Sports.
etc.
Yeah.
Sports, yes.
Well,
And
you're right. I mean, I'm a bad chess player. Um, I pride myself at the blunders that I can make, but I do try to improve. And I was recently watching a channel by this young grandmaster. I guess she's a grandmaster. She's either a grandmaster or pretty high master level. She's incredibly pretty. Her name's Anna Kramling. You can look her up. She's won the genetic lottery in more ways than one. Her mother was one of the first female grandmasters, and uh, I think she gets a lot of her traffic because just her profile picture.
yeah, well, being good looking is a huge asset. I mean, there's
No,
an
she is a good
enormous
chess
amount of
player, and you can learn from watching her channel.
Yeah, yeah, but if you're a good chess player and you're ugly, or you're a good place chess player and you're good looking, the good
Yeah,
looking person
there's
is going to
definitely
get
going
way
to be
more
a
attention.
bonus there. Yeah.
I mean, there's an enormous literature in cognitive bias research that attractive people, do much better in life. They get more promotions, they get higher bonuses, they have more friends, they have more people wanting to be with them. And this is really basic stuff that shouldn't be a mystery to anyone.
Yeah, it's not a mystery, and it.
Do you want to know the craziest thing I read yesterday? I think on one of the scientific hub that I follow. There's a study that was done that people throughout their lives as they get older, they tend to change their facial features based on their first name expectation. And to me, that's crazy because I'm like, what? How can it be? How can there be a correlation between what a name what kind of features a name would have? How can there be such a thing? But they actually did a study. I can send the link. It's crazy. I'm like,
Yeah,
what?
you should send the link to the
I
paper.
send you
I
the
haven't
link.
heard of that.
Yeah, it's very interesting because it was an actual study that they made that people features tend to match the expectations of the features of a certain name. That's okay. I'll find it. I'll link it up.
Yeah,
Let me
please
see.
do.
Yeah. Well, uh,
Search.
it's Oh, what I wanted to mention um, that I'm going to do an actual episode of the Wild Signal podcast soon, and the guest has already been determined, uh, and it has to do with the Wild Signal, sort
Nice.
of. um, his name's he's been on before, but this was a very long time ago. His name is Abel Mendez, and
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
he's
Dr.
he's a guy in
Mendez.
Central America.
yeah, and
Oh, Dr.
he's at the
Mendez.
University of
Wow,
Puerto Rico.
I followed him a lot on
Yeah, he used
Twitter
to
X.
he was affiliated with Arecibo when that was a working telescope.
Yes, he was,
Oh yeah,
and
definitely.
he still. Thing is, they didn't throw out the data when they
Right,
decided not to rebuild
the
the
antenna.
observatory. They still have all the data in some kind of archive form, and it's a lot. And he and his students have been mining the data, looking for signals like the wow signal. Now, I'm gonna have to ask him, because we did SETI at home for years, and a lot of those data were from Arecibo. So, but he's got other data, and he's got earlier data from before SETI at home started. So I'm gonna get him on the. He doesn't want to talk about it until the anniversary, which is August 15th, which is week after next. So he and I are going to set up a time and we'll have a little chat about that. And
I put the link in the chat.
hopefully he has something cool
That's
to
all.
announce. But even if he doesn't, I'm still curious about how he went about it, and what they did learn, even if they didn't find a signal. But he's playing it close to the vest. He hasn't revealed anything yet that I'm aware of about what they found.
Well, is there rumors for you to expect something that's going to have been found?
No rumors that I'm aware of.
What, the X planet you're talking about? Are you talking about the X planet, the so-called X planet? Or
These
you
aren't
talk-
This isn't an exoplanet study.
Oh, I
He's
thought you
he's
were
looking
talking
at
about
the signals.
No, I didn't mean the exoplanet. I meant the famous
Planet
planet
X.
number 9, the planet number 9 on the solar system. I thought
I don't. I don't know. He's involved
There's
in that
still-
at all.
I think there's still debate going on, by the way.
Oh, it's a
There's-
big. Yeah, it's a big, fun
I still
controversy.
think there's something out there, basically.
Yeah, well, some people say there's definitely something out there because we have all this gravitational
Yeah.
evidence, and
Yeah.
other people are saying, well, maybe there's some other explanation for that. So, and the thing is, they've done enough searching that they've kind of ruled out a lot of the regimes and sizes and so on.
Mhm.
So it should be. It's one of those fun science controversies that doesn't affect life on Earth at all. But those are the kind I prefer, really.
What, you prefer the science controversies that have no effect on life on Earth?
Yeah, they're much more fun. The
So if
ones
there
like
was a-
climate change, which really isn't a controversy anymore, is
Is Pluto
I
a
would
planet?
argue it is.
that gets me worried more and more every year.
Is Pluto a planet?
Hmm?
Is Pluto a planet?
Now that's one I just don't care about. It's not a question of fact, right? It's just a question of definition. I kind
Question
of
of
go more with
definition.
Alan Stern's view that Pluto is a planet, but there's lots of other planets in that same class.
Right. That would be like the opposite of the other. Yeah.
So Alan
right.
Stern says, why do we just have 8 planets? Why not have like 40 planets? And I think his argument holds water. I could be wrong. I don't care.
I
Well,
think
like you
that-
said, it's a matter
you
of
can say we have
definition.
8 planets. You
Yeah.
can say we have
Yeah.
9. You can say we have 50.
Right.
As
Oh,
long as you have a definition that is clear. And the
Right.
problem is the new old planet definition that demoted Pluto isn't all that great. So
pretty strict. More strict.
so
Well, it just adds to the idea that the geophysical definition of a planet is that something that's rounded by its own gravitation, and that just adds that it has enough gravitation that it clears certain gravitational
well, it has to be
areas
rounded by its own
around it.
gravitation and not orbiting another planet.
Yeah,
Because a lot of the moons are rounded by their own gravitation.
True,
The
true.
bigger ones.
True.
So
that orbit the sun. They orbit the sun by themselves without other
Yeah,
companions.
orbit the
Without
sun.
other satellites that
Yeah.
orbit them.
well, when I was a student, which before the ice receded, uh,
That age.
the belief there were some people who thought quite seriously that Pluto had once been a moon of Neptune and gotten ejected
Yeah.
by some gravitational event, and that's why the orbits come very close together sometimes, and the I don't know. I think that last I checked, that was not that fallen out of favor quite a bit. So
But it's considered one of the trans-Neptunian objects, though, I think.
yeah, well, Alan Stern's group just announced that they found a bunch, and well, they found evidence of many more Newtonian objects
Oh,
much
there's a
further
lot.
away.
Oh, yeah. See, that's why the thing about Pluto is like, okay, if Pluto's a planet, like you said before, if Pluto's a planet, there's how many hundreds of Plutos out there? I mean, hundreds of planets, right? If you classify
There are at
Pluto
least
as
dozens, if not,
maybe
if not
more.
hundreds.
Uh,
And
yeah,
and just by discovery bias, there probably are hundreds or
right.
thousands.
Exactly.
Uh,
And just because Pluto happened to be the first one discovered years and years ago, I forgot all the discovery history, but yeah, that there was no knowledge at the time. All these other objects in the solar system, many being similar to Pluto, right?
Well, like Paul said, the observational bias, it's easier to see big things than small things, and that's why our um, first tranche of exoplanets were hot Jupiters because they're
Uh,
massive and they're close to their stars, tugging it around. And it's only with significantly refined technology that you can start to look for small Earth-sized planets.
yeah. Well, right now you can only see them if they make a really perfect transit, which is like 5%, or if they're really close. Um,
There's a lot of people who have taken, transit spectrometry and then correlated it with the radial velocity methods, and you get a pretty
yeah.
good idea of what's going
Well,
on in a
yeah.
planetary
Kepler
system.
Kepler was actually a fantastic instrument. Rest in peace, Kepler. Uh, they were able to see transits exquisitely well, and now you have TESS, which is a different strategy, but it's still working. They're getting planets off of TESS, and Plato's going up in a couple of years, which is sort of the European TESS, but different.
I used to working on the web team, Paul.
No, they of course
They
once
switched.
we had a successful launch, the web team was downsized quite a lot.
Okay, obviously.
And the contract that I had was the contract tasks I was working on were canceled, which is fine. That it
It
was a
was
huge
expected.
success. I'm very happy with how it
It
came
was
out.
expected, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I went to work on Mars Sample Return for a while. It got canceled for the wrong reason, or at least for unhappy reasons. But frankly, as good as the team was, it never coherent. They never really converged on a solution that made everybody happy. And I was sitting there watching it all happen. I could see, my gosh, we're just not converging.
Mm.
People change this, and then it makes something else change, and then because it was JPL and Goddard trying to work together with ESA,
Mm. Oh,
and other stuff was going on too, and just making that happen would be a masterpiece of management. JPL was involved in web, but their involvement was very specific, and sort of compartmentalized,
mm.
and that made it go a lot smoother. They built, for example, the cryocooler that cools the focal plane of the mirroring instrument to just ridiculously cold temperatures, and it works great. JPL, when they build something like that, it will almost certainly work really great, and be impressive. And MIRI itself, of course, is a stunning instrument. And so I can't remember how much it cost, but I think it was, you could probably launch a lot of other spacecraft for what that one instrument cost. But it's an amazing thing. So now I'm working on space weather, which is a much happier world.
Okay. Yeah.
Not as big, not the billions of dollars flowing into it, but It's very important, and NASA does have some initiatives with NOAA to,
Oh, that's why you mentioned Noah earlier. That's
yeah,
right.
NOAA. Well, I've worked with NOAA before, but NOAA, what's part of NOAA is the Space Weather Prediction Center in Colorado, and NOAA is, they're really good at, that kind of thing, the whole, predicting where CMEs are going to go and so forth.
Yeah.
They have the science chops. NASA's good at building tough, reliable satellites that will go out there. And so that's, I'm on the NASA side of it, sort of spacecraft systems guy, which is what I love doing. The stuff I was doing on James Webb is not what I love doing, but it was James Webb, so I was willing to do it. It was hard work. It was not gratifying, really. It was, but it had to be done. We had to certify that we were ready to launch the satellite, the observatory, I should say.
Right.
And the talent level of people working on that was just the best nest could put out. Just great people, and both contractors and civil servants. And it was the reason, it was very expensive, yes, but it was also something nobody had ever done before, which when you do that, you can't guarantee what the schedule is going to be. You just know it's going to be hard, and then you take it from there. It was very hard. Very impressive what they got done there. Really, I wouldn't say exquisite engineering, but very complex engineering. And it all got done.
Of course, the old
And
window.
it unfolded properly and works now.
Yeah, it got stuck a little bit, but they were being super cautious about how they unfolded it. So
The old mirror unfolding and all that, right? That was the first. I mean, I don't know if there was any other.
That's a really big mirror. I don't know that anybody's ever
done anything.
had to do that before.
Right.
It was also the big, 7-layer shade that had to unfold.
Yeah, well, the sunshade was actually every bit as complex.
Yeah.
Optically, it's a lot simpler, but mechanically, not simple. And the people that did that were, they spent years and years looking at everything that could possibly go wrong and trying to make sure that it wouldn't. And they succeeded. There was over 100 actuator devices on that thing. And it was just, it was impressive. The sun shield's out, and the sun shield didn't just have to come out and unfold. It had to be tensioned properly.
Yeah.
And that all worked. You couldn't have just flopping in the breeze. That would that would be bad. So yeah, everything worked. They've had some glitches, but it's really an outstanding system. So I can say I worked on it. The work I did was very unglamorous.
Yeah.
But it was mainly pushing bits of paper into the same place, sort of system engineering janitor work. But I did it, and I got paid
every little piece
just
of
fine
work.
for it. It didn't,
I mean, you were part of a gigantic puzzle, but every piece of the puzzle, without the pieces, the puzzle doesn't exist, right?
Well, I had zero design input because I came on quite late, and I much prefer to work on a program where I can at least have some influence over the design.
I know, but still, see, sometimes I feel like, what I do, I feel like insignificant, but it's kind of easy to fall into the trap of mental trap of thinking, your job.
Well,
especially when you work
this
for
is
the
the
large
greatest
organization.
observatory that's going to fly for probably 30 years, if not longer. It'll probably outlive me, and
Oh, yeah.
and or if it doesn't, I'll be too old to appreciate what's going on. But it'll be a long time before we build something better, and it's going to make just piles of discoveries. So it's great.
I've heard of the Roman. It was just the Roman Space Telescope.
Oh, the Nancy Grace Roman. That
Is
was
that a,
that
is
was
that
the
a
one that
European?
they were given by uh,
I can't
by
remember.
NRO. So it only cost a few $1 billion to turn it into an astronomy instrument.
Oh, that's a NASA project. Okay,
Yeah,
I couldn't remember.
it's at Goddard.
Oh, it is.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and they had problems when the cost ballooned, even though they were given the telescope.
Oh, it's an infrared. It's an infrared.
Infrared. It's going to be more of a
Uh,
survey instrument
uh,
than a stop and stare instrument like
attached.
JWST.
Okay.
JWST
Okay.
was, it's designed to look
Mm.
at very small parts of space and integrate for a long time. And whereas Nancy Grace Roman, as I understand it, will be mostly doing surveys, very sensitive
So the
surveys. Surveys.
GWST is more akin to the Hubble, if you want, as far
Yeah,
as
but it's in the deep infrared. Well, mid infrared. It goes into the mid infrared
okay.
where Hubble can't see,
Mhm.
and doesn't even look in the visual really much at all.
Mm.
Um,
But I
and-
think the comparison Chiro is making is that it can look at an object for a long time, which is
yeah,
what, like
actually,
the,
Right,
the
right.
Hubble did
Whereas
with the
type
it can
of
do
yeah.
longer integrations than Hubble can do on most objects.
Mhm.
Hubble was very limited in where it could stare
Mm.
because it was close to the Earth,
Mm.
and so it
Okay.
couldn't look
The location of
along
where it
the
was
velocity vector,
positioned.
which was constantly changing,
Mm.
and it couldn't look anywhere, and it had to watch out to not point too close to the sun. What we've done with JDOST, it's got its back to the sun basically all the time. It's out at Earth Sun L1, which means that it can see a huge part of the sky at any given time and point to it and stare at it for a long time.
Mhm.
It's not as limited, and it also has a much bigger mirror. So,
Hmm.
which now, but the infrared is actually great because when we look at the early universe, almost everything's redshifted
Right.
a lot, and
Find a way. Yeah.
yeah, and also infrared's also great for looking at planetary disks, that kind of thing. So it's a hell of an instrument. It's actually it's multiple instruments. You got MIRI, you got the mid infrared, which is MIRI, and you've got the near infrared, which is NearCam and NearSpec. Really two near infrared instruments, and so they have a lot of capability, a lot of magnification, a lot of ability to integrate for a long period of time. Fewer constraints. Now, of course, they can't look back at the sun. But
Mm.
if there's something you want to see, and it's in the direction of the sun, you just wait a few months, and it's now visible, and it will be visible for months. So it's really good. And the only constraint basically is the sun shield has to work, keep the sun completely off the instruments for
Yeah.
whichever way you point the observatory. That's not a huge constraint. It's a big shield. That's one of the reasons it's so big. And it was driven by the science requirements. So there's what I think really a big part of the success is the science team was really involved and really drove the engineering a lot. The engineers didn't just go off in a corner and design something. The scientists were right there the whole time, and they understood the mission requirement, the science requirement, really in great depth. And so, yeah, great science team, great, really actively involved science team, which is important. That's also, I think a big factor in the success of New Horizons.
Mm.
Really good science team, heavily involved.
What do you think?
Alan Stern is a dynamo. Have you ever met him? He's a tiny little man. I don't think he's more than 5'3". But
Alan Stern, yeah.
yeah, he's
Oh,
a
really?
tiny
He's not
guy,
that tall.
but he's got the energy of 5 men, and super
he's
smart too. So he's all over everything.
Oh, he's
And,
very assertive, very articulated, assertive and outspoken, and yeah.
Yeah, well, he has a certain amount of charm as well. So he could come to D.C. He would testify before Congress. The next morning he'd be in a design review, asking good questions, and then then he'd go back to Boulder and get in the clean room with the instrument, and he did all that. He did it. His time management skills must be incredible. And he was a big reason for him and his science team, a big reason for the success of that mission.
To think that some of those people that worked on the mission worked before the launch, they worked for like decades to see that happening. I think there was a documentary that I watched.
Yeah.
A little bit
Well,
ago about that, yeah.
There was a mission before New Horizons called Pluto Express was out of JPL.
Oh.
Same basic mission profile, fly by Pluto. But their costs kept growing and growing and growing. And eventually NASA said, okay, we can't afford any more cost growth, but it seems inevitable there will be some. So what NASA was going to cancel it completely.
Stern's book, Chasing New Horizons, goes on into great detail on all the precursors and the decades of effort and how they had to every year, every 10 years NASA releases a report on what they're going to prioritize, and you have to basically get into decadal survey. You have to politic really heavily to make sure that your project is the number one priority, because the only way it's going to happen is if your project is the number one priority in the decadal survey.
But for a long time Mars sample return was the number one priority, probably still is, but it got shut down. I believe it will be revived at some point, especially with the stuff they've been finding on Mars that looks so intriguing. But the cost and schedule growth both were just out of control.
Viper, that's the one that they canceled. Some people are like, oh, they shouldn't have canceled that. Do you know which one? It was a lunar rover, right?
No, an orbiter. It's a land. It was meant to land on the South Pole
of the moon, right?
Yeah, and it had a lot of cost growth. I
heard a lot of people in the scientific community be pretty disappointed.
Yeah, and to them it looks like a silly thing to do because it's almost done, right?
Mm-hmm. It was almost completed.
Yeah, it's pretty much built, and mostly tested. So it needs to finish its test campaign and then get on a launch vehicle and go to the moon. So they said, how much cost growth is there to be in that, right? Which is a fair argument. But NASA needs the money for other things, and said, "Look, it's grown too much. We can't afford it anymore. We're gonna have to cut it off." Yeah. So what they're going to do is they're going to put a mass simulator on the lander, and the lander's still going to land, but
how do you know that?
They're still good. Well, they have a separate contract for the lander. The lander is, is getting close to ready to go, So, in fact, if I recall correctly, it's pretty much done.
Mm.
So uh, they're gonna supply a mass simulator to land on the moon,
Huh.
and not Viper. Viper will go into storage. They may decide to revive it at some point,
Yeah.
but NASA does not have. People think NASA has a big budget. It does not,
No.
given all the things it has to do by statute. You know,
When do they reach the? See, that's the thing, though. I'm sure that they got parameters, and you might know, I don't or not, I don't know, but to what extent. But when do they? When do they think? When do they say, okay, we reached the point of no return? In other words, we spent so much money on a certain project that, I mean, is there such a thing where they could say we have to move on, we have to go on because the
yeah.
loss was
Well, they've
immense.
done that with Mars sample return. It
Okay,
was
there
the
was a point that,
number one planetary science priority, and it's been shut down. Now, I do believe it's going to be revived at some
hmm,
point, but it's going to have to be radically redone,
hmm,
and not so much the engineering, but the organization is going to have to be
hmm,
very different. Uh, this and the problem is that's politically really difficult to do. So they couldn't just do it. They couldn't just say, okay, well, okay, we're going to give this to Goddard, and we're not going to use the European spacecraft, and
hmm.
because screw politics. You can't do that
Yeah, to get
realistically.
the money.
Uh,
That's where the money comes from, I guess, in the first place.
yeah, and they, what they so what if they but if they shut it down, they revive it, then they can rebuild it.
Hmm.
So I think they should. You have to have a rocket, and I think that one's probably going to stay where it is. And Marshall Space Flight Center is going to work with industry to develop this little rocket that lands on the surface of Mars, and then the samples get loaded into it, and it goes up into orbit around Mars.
Mm.
That's probably not going to change. That part's not going to change. But all the rest of it probably will, including probably rejiggering the requirements substantially
Mm.
to make it more doable and cheaper. But part of the big problem was there was the reverse contamination of the Earth. This thing's going to land in the desert in Utah, and if you say, well, gosh, there's some tiny chance that the dust that got onto the rocket or onto the sample container while it was being loaded, or didn't get off of the sample container before it got into the return vehicle, um, that if that lands in the Utah desert and it has the Andromeda strain on it, we're all going to die. You know, well, nobody really buys that scenario, but you can imagine the politics of that.
They do have entire offices dedicated to that kind of stuff, though. You
Planetary
know that.
protection, yes.
Yeah.
So that was something that was going back and forth a lot when the program was cut off. Because now, is there still a Mars sample return objective? Yes. So, and it gets stronger every time that Perseverance comes across a cool new sample. So,
Mhm.
and the stuff they found I think I announced it just last week. There was some rocks that had these little leopard spots on them, and these 1 millimeter spots that,
Oh, the ones that I think I saw the headlines. I didn't read the story. Yeah, I saw the headlines.
yeah. And also, Curiosity came across a rock that was almost pure sulfur.
Oh,
Now, of course, we can't return samples collected by Curiosity because Curiosity, you know, is nowhere near Perseverance. But
no, I got the location, different locations.
yeah,
Has anyone suggested bringing the samples back to Earth orbit where they could be examined in an orbital laboratory without ever bringing them to the surface of Earth?
yes, but that is not a mainstream view. And of course, they're getting rid of the space station. So, what do we have a lab that we could, in orbit that could have all that sophisticated equipment that we'd need?
Give it to the Chinese.
They'll probably
They-
they're going to do it themselves. The Chinese will do it anyway.
Sure.
They're not as good at rovers, but
No.
they're also a lot less risk averse.
They are.
If they fail, they will do it again until they get it
Yeah.
right.
Hello, Elon Musk.
That's another thing is Elon Musk has been saying, "Don't worry, I'll bring you your samples. Just
I think it would be incredibly funny if SpaceX gets there first and the astronauts go around collecting the sample returns
Right
so they can bring
now-
them back to NASA.
well, I don't think they'll have people before, but right now the schedules look more like SpaceX will get there first.
Yeah.
SpaceX had a little robot to go and collect the sample container from Perseverance and just run it back to the Starship. And assuming the Starship at that point has the design to make its own fuel, then yeah, you could do it. But one of the reasons the Starship uses methane instead of hydrogen, and these LOX is methane, is because you can make methane and LOX on Mars.
Mm.
You can't.
They can refuel.
Yeah, and also, there's other reasons for that. It's just, even though pure hydrogen is a little bit more efficient when combusting.
But there's so much more risk. Their risk appetite is so much larger. They historically, SpaceX is not doesn't shy away from going destroying things. Because they need to go ahead and move forward. So they don't.
Yeah, well, one thing that SpaceX has shown is that the old school X-plane type of approach, where you blow a bunch of stuff up, you crash stuff, it works.
Yeah.
There's never any reason to believe it didn't work. It's just that,
Now the thing is that as long as you don't have any humans on the Starship, it's okay. Well, it's not okay, but it's publicly more tolerable, right? As long as no human lives have been lost. Now,
well,
as soon
there will be,
something,
I am
dies,
sure that in going to Mars, somebody's going to die.
that's
Eventually.
what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Now the public opinion is much less tolerant of the loss of human life.
But we ran around in circles for almost 30 years with the shuttle, and we lost 14 people.
Oh, the shuttle.
How
many people lose? Like 10, 12? Wait. Well, that was Apollo. Sorry. There was the three.
Oh, two crew loads.
Yeah, Challenger and Columbia.
Yeah, Columbia and Challenger.
And trust me, I woke up the morning of the Challenger disaster thinking I had a job, which was mainly driven by commercial launches on the shuttle.
Wow.
And boom. No, that is not going to happen anymore. And because it's now very clear that we were delusional about the risks.
Yeah.
And the safety.
Right. Well, the SpaceX was stopped. It's not the same thing, but talking about the stoppages, SpaceX was stopped now for what, about a month, maybe less.
A couple of weeks. That was
for
a
couple of weeks.
That second
stage failure.
Second stage failure that they had, on a Starlink launch.
Yeah.
But those Falcon 9s have been. Well, there's been 40 some launches this year. I mean, it's a.
Oh yeah, they're incredible. They're the most
22
reliable rocket
reuses
ever
of the
built.
booster. Yeah, it's a very robust system. So you would expect it would only need a couple weeks to get. It's okay to run again.
Well, the thing is, NASA said you can launch satellites on it. We're not quite ready to go with people yet, but you can launch that. We have to have more. We have to talk ourselves into that.
But
There's
what
really
have they been
evidence that we've
using?
solved the problem.
What have they been using to put the
The
dragon
Dragon
up?
9, yeah.
Well, it's Falcon
The
9.
Dragon. Dragon 9.
It's
But they use
just,
the Falcon 9.
it's exactly the same rocket.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I
They
Now
thought.
got some
the
I'm just
Dragon
saying
does
that they
its
haven't.
final maneuvering to and from the ISS. But
Well, those, I mean, there's a, now, with the old, the segue from talking about that, right? As far as what's going on with what's happening with the Starliner, the marooned, quote unquote, marooned astronaut. They're not
well,
marooned,
yeah, that's a
but
bit of a
they got contingencies, of
that's a
course.
very
Aerospace
troubled
and
program and has been.
by Boeing, yeah, controversial
Well,
situation going
Boeing,
on.
yeah, everybody, you know, most engineers, if you've been around long enough, you've seen this kind of corruption of the culture that Boeing has
Yeah,
suffered.
yeah,
A
it's a
great
pretty.
engineering culture that they had, uh, where they built the best planes and they built rockets and they built lots of stuff. Um,
Oh yeah,
and the 747, is probably their classic
yeah.
aircraft. But
Something happened along the way. I mean, I don't know the history of
well,
Boeing.
yeah, I
Sure,
think it would happen. It had to do with with management coming in that were, bean counters and lawyers
yeah,
instead of engineers.
engineers.
Yeah, and if you want a great engineering company, you lead it with engineers. You don't lead it with MBAs. Um, and we've seen that before. You know,
Mhm.
when I was at GE Aerospace, which recently, became GE Aerospace, um, it really started to go downhill fast when they brought in professional managers who were
Hmm.
just terrible. Did not understand the culture. Didn't understand anything. A lot of people retired who could afford to retire, and um, safety culture went down the toilet. We had a number of very visible failures, and fortunately, GE was smart enough to say we need to sell off aerospace. We don't know how to manage it. So they sold it to Martin Marietta,
Right. Oh, that was oh, I didn't even know that.
and Martin
That was
Marietta later on got
because
bought
yeah,
out by Lockheed.
Lockheed and Lockheed Martin, yeah, of course.
And
Mary
became,
Marietta was in Orlando. Was the headquarters. Yeah, I think it was the headquarters was in Orlando. I remember the 80s was not merged yet, I think, but
yeah,
shortly after, I believe,
yeah. The Martin Marietta Lockheed merger took place in the
somewhere in the 90s
mid
or so.
90-ish
Yeah,
time
yeah.
frame. I was there. If I recall correctly, it was about 94.
Okay, that makes
Um,
sense.
and a lot of us weren't happy about that because we thought Lockheed had the same disease that GE had. But and they made decisions based more on real estate than on how people are going to respond to being moved around and well, I mean, even though Lockheed had a great engineering culture at one point, and so did Martin Marietta, they arguably have recovered from that, but it was pretty bad for a while.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, so the Starliner, NASA wanted a second vehicle that could go to the
Yeah,
space
yeah.
station. They wanted two, so they selected two companies. One company had proven what they could do with cargo, and not yet proven what they could do with crew. Boeing had a long history in space and with launch vehicles and so forth. So they figured, well, Boeing should be able to pull this off.
Far from it.
Far from it, yeah, and it surprises me, frankly. I
I
think,
recently read that not only did Boeing get twice as much as SpaceX got, but they plowed 1 billion of their own money in it, and so they're losing vast amounts
and
of
they're
money
taking
on the
another
Starliner.
$120 million hit this year.
Wow. Because of what? Yeah. I
Uh,
wish.
well, I mean, they don't want to turn their back on NASA and say, sorry, we're losing money. We can't do this anymore. Because, when's the next time you get a NASA contract, right? Maybe never. So,
Is that the real danger that they would fall out and they would never get another contract?
well,
And
it would certainly hurt their
is
ability
the
to get.
management unified on this, or is there conflict among different layers? And some people are really into it, and some people
My
really don't
understanding,
seem
which I
to.
don't know anybody there now anymore, uh, my understanding is that um, Boeing actually did consider just turning their back on it, walking away from it. But NASA and other government people came in and said, not a good idea. Um, they said, well, we're losing so much money. And yeah, well, you know, uh, show us what you can do. Build something better. Um, and then you can take credit for that and you can build on that. So anyway,
I mean,
but
people say it's a miracle they made it up to the station because the RCS are defective and now they can get them
I
to
don't
be
think it was a miracle. I think I mean, it's pretty robust design, but
well.
they
I
had a lot
think
of faults,
well
but
now they don't feel comfortable to bring them back yet at this point. So
yeah,
they're debating. As of this morning, they were talking about considering them coming back with SpaceX with the
yeah. Well,
Dragon.
there's multiple options. One is
Mhm.
you splash down an empty capsule to verify that you can do that,
Mhm.
which there's actually doesn't need a crew to do that.
Right.
Um, there's not really a pilot.
The
Yeah,
orbiting it.
all
Yeah.
that's planned on the ground and can be executed automatically.
But they're
But
still thinking about considering them coming back on the capsule.
yeah, they'd have to take a Dragon up there and get them and bring them back.
Right. No, but I mean
Don't they
coming back
have
with the
a
Starliner, with the risk right now, it's they feel that it's still too high to make that decision though. Otherwise, they would have made it. They should have been
aren't
back
there
by
a
now.
couple aren't there a couple Soyuz docked at the ISS that are basically there as lifeboats for the crew?
Yeah, but I don't know that they would
I
go
don't
with.
think no, I don't think that.
I don't know if they have Soyuz or only the cargo Soyuz right now, but
Things are.
well, I mean, they always have. Like I think it might be correct. Do they have Soyuz always at least one of them for the Russians
That's
anyway?
what my understanding is. They always had at least one docked there.
But I don't know how that
I'd
works.
have to go look it up, but I think there's not one there.
But I don't know now if they
Not
are
one
they
that
still
you'd want to
bringing
trust.
Americans back to Kazakhstan. They are, right? Are they still bringing American back to Kazakhstan now? I don't. I don't even know, to be honest with you.
Um,
I don't know, but I heard that the Russian was going to go up in a SpaceX capsule pretty soon.
Oh yeah,
that
I
might
mean,
happen. Well, there's lots of things happening with Dragon. There's private missions going on Dragon, as well
yeah,
as what they call crew missions.
right.
This little failure that they had on a Starlink launch will probably result in a small delay, but I don't think it's going to be a long delay. Um, and they've since that they've had two successful launches. Um,
Can
so
they stay? I haven't been reading about this, but the interesting question is maybe one of you guys knows. Did they say how much provision wise can they like stay indefinitely now? I mean, those two guys,
I think
well, one
so.
guy and the girl, right? Like, what is?
Yeah,
Did they?
they can get enough supplies up there. I
Right.
mean, you have Cargo Dragon and you have a couple other
So they
options.
don't have an extreme urgency of bringing them back down, per se, I guess.
Yeah, it's not like they're not going to die if you leave them up there for another month or so,
Mm.
or 6 months, a year.
Well,
Uh,
because they got the other astronauts coming up on the for the regular expedition, right? So they got that schedule also. That
yeah,
would that be disrupted if they got extra people that they did not expect as far as supplies and
I'm
that
not
kind of.
sure about that. I think they can. I think Dragon's capacity, if I recall, gosh, I'm blanking on that. I think I think it's 4 people.
Okay.
Uh, but
But what about the ISS itself? Would it have enough
I
provisions
think they can
for
manage,
extra
but
people?
at some point, of course, it gets risky,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
if there should be a failure, then you'd have less time to recover
Right.
because you have to provide life support for more people.
For
So
more people, yeah.
I think I'm sure NASA has a definite limit in mind, the number of people they want up there at any given time,
Sure. Sure.
and
Makes sense.
it's not a large number.
Hmm. Definitely. Maybe two
And
people for a while, like you say, maybe two more people for a while is not gonna cause a lot of disruption in
yeah, well,
the
they'll be able to
supply
supply
chain and,
them.
and
I think
stuff.
the problem you get into is, that there are systems that have had problems. They work pretty well most of the time,
Hmm.
but if you get into a backup system, then you might be down to no margin.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's it's kind of it's a little bit tricky.
Pretty new situation. I don't believe they've ever been in this kind of predicament before, not to my recollection. As far as, I mean, people quote unquote stranded on the international.
Well,
They're
it's
not
just because
stranded.
they're being super careful about,
Yeah.
this is an unproven
Right.
vehicle. They're being
Right.
super careful about not putting humans on it that could be killed if this thing doesn't
Yeah.
work properly.
As you said earlier, they're very risk averse now.
They are extremely risk averse. It doesn't mean that there aren't any risks. It just means that you know,
Yeah, well, this program was risk averse with the shuttle, as you said. They
This
lost
is
two crews.
Well, this is a test mission to begin with. This one was right, the first Starliner, the first manned Starliner. So it's still considered
it was the first
test
crew
mission.
Starliner. Just
It's not
like Dragon flew with two people. This is flying with two
right.
people.
So, but yeah,
Um, the crew, you don't really need a crew on board to demonstrate that the thing works 100%. Except for the life support systems, which you can demonstrate
yeah.
other ways. But
You're gonna do that with the dummies. You're gonna have a realistic dummies with sensors, I suppose, right?
yeah, well, yeah, you can just verify that the oxygen levels
Yeah.
are right and the pressure's right and temperatures are okay. You can do that without flying a
Humans.
person. The people do put a bit of a load on that system. They have respiration and body heat and so on that has to be taken care of.
Consideration,
But it's not a real complex problem. I think that it's just that politically, if you say we've never flown people on it before, then nobody wants to be the one who said, oh well, to go ahead. Just go ahead. Don't worry about it.
Nobody wants to be the one that is gonna end up being hanged if two people lose their
Yeah, well, people still remember Challenger
Yeah.
and the people that said, or Columbia, go ahead, it's all right, no problem. And how radically wrong they were. And
And obviously, these people are smart. It's a hard call to make. They would have made it already by now if it
yeah,
was. It must be a hard call to make for
it
sure.
is a hard call. That's what and I don't. I'm. It's not easy. I think my guess is they will end up sending them back on the Starliner.
You think so? Yeah.
Yeah, but they have to convince themselves that there's still plenty of margin, even, and that we understand where the faults came from and the leaks and so forth, and it's not going to get worse. The thruster failures.
I mean, this. I'm not saying. I'm not minimizing the value of the two astronauts, the value of the life of the two astronauts. But my point is that they are test pilots, and they knew that on top of the risks that are always there when you launch to space, there were extra risks. Given that by the fact that this is a test mission, was the first. So these are. I guess to a certain point, there's a certain amount of risk that they accept as astronauts, right? To say, okay, we don't want to die. Nobody wants to die, but at the same time,
Well, that's true. And
you know what I mean?
astronauts, anybody who sits on top of a chemical bomb,
exactly.
a huge chemical bomb, and then lights it off, is taking risk.
Yeah.
And they have to have there has to know that there's been all the engineering's been done properly and that the risks have been mitigated, and there's a plan if something goes wrong. You know,
Hmm.
even
Test
how
pilots. I mean,
remotely unlikely
aircraft
it
pilots.
happens to be.
Yeah.
There was nothing like that for the shuttle. They had,
Hmm.
well, they had, they had transatlantic aborts and return to launch site aborts, things like that.
Right.
But none of that could compensate for what happened on Challenger. And
Yeah.
that was just that the rocket flames out and doesn't get you to orbit. There's a way to get back safely. But um,
You can have as many contingencies. There's always going to be situations that are not going to be having any contingency, like what happened.
yeah, thing
What
is,
they're going to do? I mean, are they going to have a way to abort? I mean, once you put the guys on the capsule and you send them back to Earth, when can you possibly abort? You
well, you
can't abort.
can't. Once you fired the thrusters to
Yeah.
re-enter,
What are you going to do? I mean, are they
you're
going to?
done. I mean, you have to
Exactly, you're
rely on
done.
the
That's
system
it.
to work.
If there's a failure in the middle of the reentry phase, what the heck can you do to save the astronauts? I
Well,
don't know. If there's
no, you
any.
can't. That's why everything has to be more or less work passively.
Hmm.
Of course, the parachutes aren't passive, but the heat shield and the stability reentry has to be passive. It has to be
Hmm.
the physics of it just works. You know,
But you can imagine a time in the future when they're using retro rockets when they do have a fallback. They start to descend, and then they find themselves in trouble, and they put themselves back up into orbit.
well, if you have enough fuel, yeah, you could do that.
Yeah.
It might not be an option now, but it might be an option in the future.
Yeah. The thing is, you don't know it's not going to work until
Well, you
at
test it
that
beforehand,
point.
though.
You don't know.
Is,
You don't know that there's going to be a problem with, say, the parachute. You know, if the parachutes don't open, it's really bad. Probably going to
Well, the
kill the crew.
Soviets had two catastrophic failures, one of which the cosmonaut burned up on the way down, and the other where a valve opened up and the three suffocated because they lost all the air.
well, what about the one? I don't know how recent the one that you mentioned, but you remember the one that was I think a couple of years ago, not that long ago, where the astronauts, one American was on it, the Soyuz.
Yeah,
They
the
failed
Soyuz did a
they failed
prop.
the ascent, and it was ejected. Right? Were they ejected?
Well, no, the capsule
Yeah,
was shot
eject.
off and
Yeah, ejected.
came back down.
Came back down. Right, that one. Right,
But
it
the
was one
parachute
American.
opened and they were okay.
Right, but
Uh,
but
that's
there was a
similar
failure.
to what SpaceX has built into the
Okay.
Dragon.
Was it similar to the eject cap to yeah the eject system
Yeah,
on that yeah
they had a failure on ascent,
abort
uh,
system?
and they uh, they ejected the capsule and it re-entered properly,
Yeah.
and they did not die.
Yeah.
Um,
Jeez.
the scary, but yeah, I mean, and they've got that capability in the Dragon. I'm not sure what Starliner can do. I
So
think they have
yeah, so
something
that's what I was
similar.
getting at. The consequences of RCS malfunction is that again end up getting stranded in a bad orbit, or could actually even be able even happen to burn in get into a bad reentry angle and all that stuff. Which there are a lot of risks with RCS not functioning. I mean, you cannot control the attitude
Yeah.
or anything, right?
Well, the attitude should be passively controlled on the way in,
Oh,
on
you
the
can, you
reentry.
can, okay.
Yeah, and then you send out the parachutes, and that's what stabilizes you.
But when
Uh,
you are still too far from I mean, when you're still trying to go ahead and do the orbit burn and all that stuff, don't you need the reaction control system to?
yeah, you do. Of course, if you don't do
Yeah,
the orbit burn, then you've got time to figure out uh,
right.
what to do. In
Hmm.
fact, you probably have enough. If you're assuming you can get some thrusters to work, you can probably get back to the station.
Hmm.
Um, so it takes a fair bit of delta V to uh, to re-enter
Hmm.
reliably um, at the right angle. Um,
Hmm.
but this is something we've been doing since the early '60s. So,
Yeah, Apollo era.
well, before Apollo.
before even Apollo.
We could do splashdowns. And the Soviets did the hard
Bump
landing.
down.
Hmm.
Splash down the snow, or
No down. I don't know, something like that.
yeah. Well, it's a little rougher, but it it's not that bad. But the yeah, it's just
I have to look at the articles. I haven't
it
looked
is. I mean,
at
there.
so
If
far.
you're an astronaut, you're taking risk. It's not like getting on a 747.
Okay, exactly.
Flying to
that's
LA.
that's the other argument, right? I mean,
Everything involves some risk, but and eventually, I think the risks will get worked downward. But going to Mars is going to be risky.
that's going to be the field. A lot of different questions of, ethics and, that kind of. It's hard. I mean, that's what I think that SpaceX, it's so successful and everything, and I still think that they're one large tragedy away. Not that I want it to happen, but they're one larger tragedy away from being set years and years. Well, I mean, that's kind of understandable, right? If something
Well,
else
they have shown a lot of robustness in terms of coming back from failures
yeah,
in the past.
When Virgin Galactic lost one or two test pilots, I think they closed things down for like 3 years before they tried
They broke
again.
away again.
So that's another private industry comparison. But yeah, it depending on how it gets spun, a catastrophic accident for SpaceX could be the end of the company, or it could be we have to accept losses and go
setback.
forward with it.
Long
Well,
setback.
I think it'll be the latter. I mean, they're making tons of money.
And the government is relying heavily on them
yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And I mean, the military is salivating over the prospect of the capacity of Starship to put tons into orbit.
Yeah, it has a lot of potential, especially when they get the on-orbit refueling working properly, which
Yeah.
they're already working on that. There could be a massive amount of tonnage delivered very rapidly. What they want to do, which I think is extremely ambitious, but is a good target, is they want to be able to launch every day, and maybe multiple times a day
Pretty close.
with Starship. So that's why they
Oh, the Starship.
yeah, they want to be able to bring it down back to its launch site,
Yeah.
capture it, and put it right back on the launch stand.
Fuel it back up and send it back off.
Well, you
Like
do
a
a quick
rapid
checkout,
turnaround.
of course, to make sure all the
Rapid
systems are still
turnaround.
functional.
They're like the 2 weeks away from number 5, from flight number 5. I think
They're
2
getting
weeks
close to number 5. Yeah. Now
Yeah,
I think the
a
objective
couple
of
of
that
weeks
one
away.
may include the booster returning to
To
the launch site.
to the attempt to
Not
do
the
that.
Starship. The Starship will still be
Yeah,
sacrificed.
splash whatever they go, send it.
Yeah. Once they get the booster captured, which is risky because it doesn't have that much fuel left in it, but if it
Yeah.
comes down and they miss or they make a mistake, you get a big mess on the ground, which might take months to fix.
Yeah.
Especially when you got something as sophisticated as the calipers that are supposed to grasp onto that. If you blow that all
the
up.
chopsticks. They call them.
Chopsticks. The chopsticks. That's gonna be-
Yeah. Well, it's big, it's heavy, sophisticated piece of equipment. Yes, and it probably costs a lot of money.
oh man.
They're about to build a second one. In fact, they're in the process of building a second launch tower in Texas. Based on the first one, it'll be done in 2 or 3 months.
But they're perfecting the launch pad. That they're perfecting it now more and more. The
Yeah.
platform, right after the different damage caused by the other failures.
Yeah,
The first one that excavated.
Yeah, the
A
first
lot
one
of
was
water.
Whole area
was a
of the
horrible
launch.
mess, and they learned their lesson from that, and they went to
Yeah.
the deluge system.
See,
And
that's the thing, though. they have what I'm talking about, was talking about earlier about SpaceX, right? That
Yeah.
they destroy a lot of things, but they learn they learn so much,
They pivot and they rebuild and they
and they
keep
rebuild,
going.
And they
yeah.
did it. They did the whole pivot, rebuild, retest, recertify in about a year, which I can't imagine ULA doing that in less than 3 or 4 years.
No, no, the way they were in there with excavators, they were pouring cement and rebar very quickly once and it didn't take them all long at all to settle on the water deluge system. And they probably already had it
Well,
designed. They
their
were just
their engineering team is extremely good. Uh, they're impressive. They even if their solution's not the right one, they will learn and they will get a better one. And they'll get it fast,
Yeah.
and which is how they've gotten the Falcon 9 to be so crazy reliable.
Mhm.
Back when I started my career, we assumed that 5% of all launches were going to fail, which was
that was accurate.
which
In
was
the
pretty.
early
That was pretty much where the stats were uh, for the more reliable launch vehicles, like Delta II, uh, and also the Russian Proton and others like that. Run around 95, maybe a little better, and Falcon 9 was something like 300 launches without a failure. That's just crazy.
Uh,
Um, it just got so routine.
well, the thing is that I think that the whole philosophy, Elon Musk is, I mean, he's who he is. I'm not gonna talk about anything other than he's his
rockets.
leadership, not other
Not
stuff,
his
but
mental health.
nothing about his person because that's obviously controversial. Anyway, but he knows that. I think he anticipates failure so much that then it's more, you know what I mean? Like when you prepare for something to fail and then it doesn't happen, it's a nice surprise that it didn't happen. But when you do not expect failure, then it becomes such a catastrophe because you were not expecting it. So philosophically, it's just helps him out so much, that doesn't happen, right? It's almost like expecting some, because he makes these jokes, like even sometimes before a launch, he says he states out in the open, if the thing is not going to blow up, who in NASA would ever make that kind of statement, even if it's a
Well, they
joke?
wouldn't.
You know what I
They
mean?
they
Well,
would.
that's why we have the saying pushing the envelope. They're
Yeah,
doing,
Well,
like you
it's like
said, it's a pleasant surprise if it comes down all in one piece. But if you
exactly.
blow it up, you've got a
Ex-
lot of telemetry that you're
exactly.
collecting the whole time and you're learning
Exactly.
from that
And
experience.
that's what's NASA a phrase, right? Failure is not an option. I think that SpaceX is failure is an option. That's what
It
they say.
is.
They say
It
failure
is.
is an
And
option.
that's because NASA is a quasi-governmental organization and SpaceX
Well,
is
it is.
not.
I mean,
well,
I
that's
come
mean,
on,
what
we've
man.
seen
SpaceX is: fail early, fail often,
Failure is so often.
or
That's
fail
right.
often, fail early. But
Failure,
don't.
is
But
failure is
then
an
absolutely.
option.
but then get it repeatable and don't fail anymore.
Yeah.
Which is what happened with Falcon 9.
NASA
Uh,
cannot afford doing that. Cannot afford having that philosophy as a government agency. It would not be tolerated.
Well, also it's been turned into
Constituents would not tolerate it.
something, by the press. I've been reading space news my entire life, and I've come to the realization that people invoke NASA's name like it's some kind of a
Oh yeah.
a magic spell. NASA scientists say, and then you'll read more clearly into the article, and you'll find out that the scientists have no connection whatsoever for NASA. It's just
I
because
know.
the writer of the article wanted to call them NASA scientists in order to give them that
Yeah.
prestige that's associated with the name.
Well, there's a
And
lot of
when you
people there.
do something like that, when you create a symbol, even if NASA isn't the one doing it, and they may be
Oh yeah.
contributing to it, but even if they're not the ones doing it, if it's the press that's doing it, that it still
They can
creates
blame
this
for
symbol.
everything. They can blame for everything. And I mean, and Paul knows this better than I do. NASA is really much more of a how many people? Well, yeah, there we got people working for NASA, but like there's thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people that are not they're NASA employees. I mean, I mean here yeah, I work
it's
in the
roughly
Space
half
Force.
the workforce is contractors.
About half of the workforce is
Yeah,
contract.
and you know
or other.
that's not every. It does vary from place to place.
Yeah, but there's a lot of people that are. I mean, NASA contracts with other companies to build
That's because you
rockets,
can pay.
anything.
That's why I'm a contractor. You can pay me
Right.
more working as a contractor than you can pay me if I was a civil servant.
Civilian service employee. Yeah.
I was
Yeah,
at a conference once. There was a guy who gave a presentation about the NIACS, is that NASA Advanced something concepts, whatever.
NACA.
And
Yeah,
he got a laugh out of the audience when he started out by saying, NASA is a big bucket of money. So that's the reductionist. And NASA is just a big bucket of money that they parcel it out to different contractors in order to do the things that they've been tasked to do.
it's not that big a bucket. The thing is,
Well,
It's
okay.
got a
compared
Well,
to
bucket,
DoD, it's nothing.
there are much bigger
but it
buckets
is,
out there. There are much bigger
but it is
buckets out there.
the point being that yeah, they
Compared
subcontract,
compared to the
double up.
F-35 program, it's small.
Right,
Here
right.
we have a company here that many people maybe not from the area I've never heard of, but it's called Jacobs. Jacobs is a contractor, but they do a lot of they run just about the entire ground systems here. But people don't know them because they're NASA contractors. That people refer, every like it's NASA, everything is NASA. But you talk to people like where you work, work for Jacobs, right? So there's a lot of contract, companies here that people work for, other companies, but they work at NASA, right, at the Kennedy Space Center, but they're not NASA employees per se.
Right.
So,
Well,
and they do a lot of important work for NASA. They are big,
Yeah.
playmakers,
but just like Paul said, they can pay staff better than a civil servant, and so this is why so many things end up getting contracted because the government is under certain
yeah.
restrictions and
Yeah. Well, the
requirements
other
that
the other
not a,
reason is that once you hire somebody as a civil servant, it's really hard to get
get
rid
rid
of
of
them.
them.
You hire a contractor, you can just say, "Yep, contract's
Right, right.
canceled. Bye.
There's
See
much
you
more
later."
flexibility, and that's why we get so much outsourcing of government functions.
Yeah. Well, you have
It,
to be
it,
very
it- it's
careful about
much
bringing
less
somebody on as a
oversight.
civil servant. It's not a small decision. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, and I have thought about going civil servant a couple times, but because they do get the plum jobs. They
Well, you
get,
got the security. You got more security too.
yeah.
Well, more job
Civil
security.
servants get the first shot at the best positions. Um, but the leadership positions, in
Yeah,
particular,
you can't become director of NASA unless you're a civil servant.
true. But that's not one of
But you
the
might
plum
be,
jobs. That's a terrible job. Uh, I would
well,
hate
if
that.
you love it, it would be a great job. If
Yeah.
you were scared of what it exposes you to, and yes, it exposes you to enormous risk.
Well, it's just that
But
it's a lot of giving speeches and
right.
and dealing with Congress and
Some people love that kind of
A
stuff.
peak
budgets and
politician
yeah,
up to the different administrations.
yeah. Well, I've known some. I did actually know some guy who was briefly head of NASA, and he loved it because he had been head of Space Department where I worked at APL. Uh, he just seemed to love it.
I almost got a job at SpaceX about 4 months ago. I went for an interview. I
Oh,
got a virtual interview. Yeah, because they're expanding over. You know that they're expanding over here they want to go ahead and eventually launch from here the Starships. You
yeah,
probably heard.
they do. Uh,
Yeah. So they are expanding and they're hiring people and stuff. And they
yeah, I tell you what, I don't think when I was young, I would have given my right arm to work for SpaceX.
oh, tell me about it. So
But
many stories.
the level of energy they demand from people now is probably more than I have given.
Oh, but if you have a family, you cannot work for SpaceX. It's just
Yeah,
almost
well, my kids are grown, but
well, I mean,
they're not out of the house, but they're grown. But the
yeah.
the main thing is, yeah, I've had some illnesses, and my my ability to work 100-hour weeks is just not there anymore.
Yeah, I know. I know. The demands is enormous. People sleeping in the middle of the cubicles and all that stuff. I mean, some might be legends, but some are it's a reality because I've heard from people that really happens that really the pressure is enormous.
Yeah.
The pressure to perform is enormous.
When
And
I was with Hughes Space, which is now Boeing Space,
Mhm.
uh, I was working so many hours they put me up in a hotel within walking distance of where I was working,
Mhm.
even though my apartment was only 5 miles away, because they were afraid I was going to drive home and after, in
Yeah,
a state of total exhaustion and
yeah,
get in a
breathing.
wreck.
Oh,
Uh,
to avoid
so
near
I
to
stayed at the
crash.
Hacienda in El Segundo. Uh,
Oh, you were over there.
yeah.
Oh, wow. But you were near Vandenberg.
No,
No,
I
no, no, no,
wasn't
Los
never at
Angeles.
Vandenberg.
Oh, you were near the base, the missile, which now is the Space System Command, which is my
It was, that
yeah,
huge
the
aerospace
base.
complex in El Segundo.
A second, yeah, that's
El
where they got.
Segundo is three things. It's a massive aerospace complex. It's a Chevron oil refinery, and it's a little small town that could easily be happy in Iowa.
But it's considered a suburb of Los Angeles, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's close enough to be considered a suburb.
and it's all right by the LAX airport. But
Hmm. Oh, okay.
yeah, um, I haven't been there in a long time. Uh,
Hmm.
well, 6 or 7 years at least. Uh, probably more like 9 years. Um, and um, I, but I, yeah, I was my apartment is in Venice Beach, not very
Hmm.
far from El Segundo,
Okay.
but
Oh,
through the LA traffic, you can if you can't keep your eyes open, you're going to hurt yourself. So um,
yeah.
it was they put me up in a hotel, and I wasn't the only one. It was, and I could do that kind of thing back then. I could work incredibly hard. I had no other responsibilities, and I was in good health. And uh, I, I can't do that now. I just physically can't.
Mhm. I got
So
I got a pretty young. I mean, you can see it when they do the launches, and sometimes they show they show um, the people at Hawthorne, the base, and they show them when they cheer up right after launch. When they do the live shots, the live streams,
yeah,
and you can pretty much see the population, right? The demographics
it's
in
young.
the
Yeah,
audience, right? How young they are for the most part. You just a bunch of kids there, basically, right?
they don't have
So
very many people over 50.
yeah, I would imagine
Probably not that many over 40. Uh, and
few and far between.
which is
Yeah,
great.
man,
I applaud what they've accomplished, and they've done it through crazy hard work and really good, really solid engineering, and which also involved a lot of crazy hard work. Uh, and that's and they've attracted a lot of talent, really really fine talent. And
definitely.
I don't know the names of very many of them, but they're if we were back in 1985, I would go work there in a heartbeat.
Mhm.
Of course, there was nobody ever thought they might exist back then.
Right
But
back then. Well, many
um,
people speculate that if it wasn't for Gwen Shotwell, right, the CEO, basically under Musk,
she's the CEO, COO. Yeah,
CEO, Chief Operating Officer, that people say that she's the one that keeps him under control. Otherwise, he would like run rampant and
well, he goes to Austin and
stop.
he can run rampant at Starbase.
Yeah,
He kind of runs Starbase. She runs Hawthorne,
corporate. Yeah, corporate.
and she also, well, she's involved in Starbase too, but obviously Starbase is a pretty smooth operation, as fast as they can get things done. Uh, there's not a lot of waste and inefficiency there,
Hmm.
uh, and um, they. But I think Gwen Shotwell can take a lot of credit for the success of Falcon 9 and Dragon, and her team has really made that happen,
Mhm.
and continues to make it happen. So,
Yeah.
but Elon is more the cutting edge guy. He's the one. He's the Starship guy,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
he's the one that says, "Well, it's okay if we blow this one up."
Exactly. Oh, yeah, exactly. That's
That's
right.
not her job. Her job
No,
is not
no, our
okay to blow up
job is to
a
tell
crew
him
dragon.
enough is en- well, our job is to tell him enough is enough, or make him see a little bit, put some brakes on him, I
Yeah.
guess, if you
Now
want. But
there may be times when Elon wants to rampage to the factory and fire everybody working on Raptor or whatever, and she probably does constrain him from doing stuff like that
exactly, yeah.
because he does have a reputation for rampaging from time to time. Um,
But what he did with X when he took over Twitter, right? Started firing people like on Zoom
yeah, I
call.
really wish he hadn't bought
Eighty
X.
percent, 80% of the staff went.
Yeah,
Well,
and he started
they're
Zoom
probably
calls.
in the
They're
long run that's probably the
gone.
right move, but I wish he hadn't bought X because I think it's
Oh man, tell me about
distracted
it.
him so
Every
much from his other work.
It's become a political instrument, but
It
Yeah,
was,
and
it always has been a
it's
political instrument.
yeah,
it's really yeah, it's
Before it
really
was the
hard.
FBI's
it's
political
become
instrument.
Elon Musk political.
Yes, it's become Elon Musk's political instrument, whereas previously it was the FBI's political
I don't know,
instrument.
but I mean the
No,
FBI.
no, the papers are out there. You can read them if you want. The FBI was telling them who to shadow ban, who to knock off the platform. I mean, it's all the information is out there.
Yeah, well, it's uh, I have a few times recently considered abandoning Twitter altogether, and I'm going to call it Twitter. Um, but
Yes,
but
okay. I
it's
guess
not
you
the
count on
platform. The
Mastodon.
platform has had some problems. Uh, he did not get rid of robo accounts at all. In fact, if anything, they've increased. Uh, verified doesn't mean verified anymore. It just means you pay $3 a month or whatever.
And before it meant that you paid people $15,000 under the table to a Twitter employee. That's how people got verified before.
Well,
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
I know some verified accounts that I'm pretty sure didn't do that, but
No. Some were given it for prestige reason, but people
yeah,
who
a
wanted
lot
it
of
really
celebrities were
badly,
just
but didn't know how to get around the
yeah,
thing, they would pay money under the table to get
yeah.
verified.
Well, um, I've not paid the basic fee that they
I'm
ask,
not
which isn't very
verified.
much money, but what is it, $7? I can't.
Something
It's
like
not
that.
much.
I got to go now because my computer is running out of electricity. It's going to flatline
Oh, your
here.
laptop. Oh, you don't have
Yeah.
a power cord? Oh, you on the
Well, I'm a little bit distant from the outlet, so
Are
I'm
you
not
You're out in
plugged.
the enjoying the summer weather?
We're
Yeah,
getting ready
our
for a
summer
storm
weather
here.
is pretty nasty, so I'm staying
We're getting
inside.
ready for a storm here in Florida. I don't know if you guys follow. Getting the storm now.
Okay, well, I think we've had a very successful tech rehearsal. This is
Yeah,
working great,
getting late. I should
and I
go
would
to.
encourage if you want to be on the next Wow Signal Live, which is right now scheduled for next Friday night.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. I didn't see that. You already
well,
scheduled.
I haven't sent out the invitation yet,
Okay.
but if you want an invitation, get in touch. WowSignalPodcast@gmail.com or whatever. DM Wow Signal Podcast on Twitter. Yes, it's called Twitter. And I don't want
Forget me.
I don't want randos, but it's not going
Oh,
to
yeah.
be it's not going to be quite like the Unseen Podcast. But this is just a pub, so it doesn't. Almost anybody can show up and make some comment, ask some question, or just generally troll us. I'm in favor of it. But Nick Nielsen and Chiro Villa, thanks for showing up and
Pleasure. Pleasure.
helping me verify that this stuff is all working properly. And looks like
Absolutely.
your stuff is all working properly. So don't change your settings. My son just got home. That's going to get noisy.
The dog.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, guys.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks
Take
for
it easy.
It's good to see you, Nick.
Good to see you.
See you next time. Take care.
I'm going to end the meeting. I'm going to end the meeting. Aren't I? Yes. Oh, you have to click end. You'd think that'd be obvious. Okay. All right, well, thanks for tuning in. Again, wowsignalpodcast@gmail.com. Sorry, camera's over here. wowsignalpodcast@gmail.com if you want any information on being on the pub, which is scheduled for next Friday. Probably be around 10 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, so 7 o'clock Pacific, very early in the morning in Europe. And I hope to see you there. If you can't, well, there'll be another one. This will be pub number 7 is coming up. So pub number 8 isn't that far off, maybe September, October. And I will have an actual podcast episode, so watch the audio feed. The RSS feed is still up, still active, still working. You can download any episode you want. Still all there to be listened to. There's a bunch of episodes, there's a bunch of bursts. If you go to wowsignalpodcast.com, you can get the whole list. Most of them cover topics like SETI, life in outer space, astrobiology, some astronomy, other things like that. And I hope to hear from you. If you can't be on the pub, at least, shoot us a DM or tweet us. Okay?